Tanya, we already know that you're a comedian with a very unique style these days. So basically, you're well known in Vancouver and you do sit down stand up comedy on the street. And you are also like a street therapist, kind of. So we have a short video from the news that actually tell us what you do and it really showcase it well. So we want to go ahead and showcase it to the audience.
Twice a week, stand-up comedian Tanya Horne sits down and dispenses more than just jokes.
First, it was about trying to uplift people, giving away my comedy. And of course, my neighbors are like, oh, not that joke again. It turned into a whole lot more than comedy. I've been deemed the street therapist now.
I love being able to see the smile in your eyes, Ray, and I love that you walk by here all the time.
She listens to passersby as much as she talks to them on Nanaimo Street in Vancouver. And if the booth idea seems familiar to you, it should.
So she came to me back in March, Lucy from Peanuts. She showed up in a very vivid dream and said, build it and they will come. Become the sit-down stand-up comedian. I woke up and thought, well, that's crazy. And so about 5 minutes later, my boyfriend was building the stand.
But Tanya's booth is not just about brightening up other people's days. This helps her as well.
I suffer or have suffered from agoraphobia over the last 20 years where I couldn't leave my house for about 5 years. People really freaked me out and scared me. During COVID, I got sort of in this mode of, well, how do I interact with people without being able to touch them, look at them, see them? So this became a great outlet for me to do reach out in my neighborhood, to talk about mental health and end the stigma around mental health.
Thank you for that. It's just wonderful. I think like from that we can already tell you're a wonderful person. So I don't know. So what more can you tell us about yourself?
Well, here's a little disclaimer. I'd like to put this in there because if you're expecting really funny, you're going to be let down because I'm only moderately funny. So, so don't have really high expectations. Now, would you agree that the world kind of got weird about 15 months ago? Right. And so I thought I'd make it weirder by sitting on the side of the road and giving away comedy. But you know what? I did try and do door-to-door comedian. Unfortunately, no one would open their door. They were terrified. I ended up on some kind of watch list and I thought, oh, okay, well, how am I going to get my comedy out to the world? And I knew people were going to be in crisis around mental health. So how can I use my lived experience and help others? So I was very thankful. Well, actually, I was weirded out at first when Lucy came to me in a dream. It was extremely vivid. And I remember waking up the next day and saying, well, that's just crazy. I should not tell anyone about that. And then my mother called me and I was like, oh, you're never going to believe this. She's like, it's perfect. So she commissioned the stand. It's a glorified lemonade stand for those who didn't catch that. And I remember the first time I rolled it out, I remember thinking, people are going to think I'm right crazy. But the pull to help others in crisis with mental health potential, with the pandemic shutting everything down and us becoming very isolated was greater than my fear not to do it. And after, being locked in my house for almost 5 years, I thought I have a duty to use this muscle that I've grown over the years with my mental health capacity to help others. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not still freaked out because going out into the world right now my anxiety is very high when I do that. But it allowed me to have a bit of a safety net. It's my safety blanket, the comedy stand. And I've now met hundreds of people where we have really intimate and amazing, authentic connection conversations. And if I walked up to them on the street and said, hi, I'm a comedian, do you want to talk? They might call security. So it's been a great way to alleviate the pressure of how do I do outreach in a world that is shut down. And so I've been there 10 and a half months now. The city did attend recently and said, well, how long do you intend to be here? I said, well, how long's COVID? If you can tell me that, I'd certainly tell you how long I'm going to be here. Because as was said before, 1 in 4 and 1 in 5, I think it's more like 3 in 4 and 4 in 5 people are experiencing some kind of level of mental health crises that they've never experienced before. And until you actually experience for yourself, you don't know the innards of that. So it's very scary, or can be very potentially very scary, especially if you don't have the help and support that you need. And there's a ton of shame around mental health. So, while I unbury myself from all of that shame and hope that alleviating the pressure that people feel with mental health by using laughter as a tool, because laughing is important, right? Laughter is so important, and it's magical because it actually scientifically changes our chemistry in our body, right? So when we smile, our chemistry changes. When we laugh, whether we're doing it when we're simulating it and or stimulating it, it is actually has a real effect in our body. So I'm all over that.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And to add to that, I've heard that the more you smile, the younger you last, right? Isn't it? Like you don't age faster.
It is anti-aging for sure. Absolutely.
Why not smile? Like, and it's free.
It is. Doesn't cost anything.
That's my
Hello.
favorite.
And it's free.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I believe that people look their best when they smile. And that's weird coming from me because I usually don't smile a lot. Right? So, and I think it's more, for me, it's more of like a cultural thing, or when I try to look like I'm very focused, like I'm trying to impress people, and then I go in the group and then I just like, right. So if you ever see me like that, I don't hate you. I love you. I am inside. It's just my
focus.
resting place.
Okay, so we're gonna move into our main, which is mental health and mental health awareness, and we have to give our disclaimer here. We are not medical professionals, although I think, Tanya, you're in training right now to be a counselor.
To become a therapist, yeah.
To become a therapist, yes. But at the moment, we are not professionals, and so we're not giving any clinical advice. We're just sharing our personal thoughts, our personal advice. If any of our viewers are in a serious situation, we urge you to seek help in the correct avenues. But we still hope that we help. So Tanya, how did you get involved with mental health, and what does it mean to you?
I became a manager at work, mental health, otherwise known as my full-time job. And it was about 20 years ago when I got that distinction of manager of my mental health and wellness, which some days feels more like mental wellness, unfortunately. And what I talked about that a little bit in that video about people scared me. I had zero trust with the world. I had been traumatized throughout my childhood, but it was when my children were traumatized that it really traumatized me. And I thought, well, I'm never going to smile again. I will never laugh again. What the heck is the point in all of this thing called life? I had zero drive. There were months and months and months when I could barely lift my head off a pillow. Yet I still had 3 kids that I had to take care of. So thankfully, I had the wherewithal to understand that legally I had a responsibility to feed them every day. And so a full fridge, a roof over our heads, and 3 meals a day meant that I was being a good parent at that point in time, because it was all I could do. It was literally all I could do. And I knew in my heart that I needed to laugh every day, because that muscle was atrophied and nearly non-existent. So I knew that I needed to laugh. I knew that I needed to learn something, and I knew that I needed to cry and release. So that was sort of, the only thing I could see was this very minimalistic life in front of me. And I thought, okay, so if I just get through and continue to breathe through all of these things. So I watched Ellen to laugh. I watched Oprah to cry. And I watched Dr. Phil before he became all Jerry Springer and stuff, many, many years ago, to learn something. And then I would go to bed at night and I'd be like, oh God, you're such a loser. Like, what's wrong with you? Those are the 3 things you did today. How could you possibly be proud of that? And it was many years later in reflection that I understood that's all my capacity was at that time. It had shrunk so much because of the trauma that I only had capacity for this much. And as the years went by and I intentionally started to heal and went to self-development and started reading books and regained my smile, inspired by my children, right? So I would see them outside laughing and playing, and I'd be like, how they've been so traumatized. Like, how can they laugh? I don't understand. But kids are resilient. And thankfully, they taught me some things about resilience and about the importance of rebuilding a life. Now, I have lots of trauma and abuse in my family lineage history, and a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction. And at that point in time, I was like, okay, so I'm really clear. I don't want my kids to suffer any further. So this isn't about me, it's about them. So really it was about being in service to others, which is interesting because I'm still doing that. And it seems to have helped along the way to rebuild the muscle of mental health strength. But, you know, generalized anxiety is crazy because I never know when it's coming and I never know when it's going to hit me. And it's not logical, right? So we try and apply a lens of logical to something that is irrational and illogical. And therefore, there's a disconnect there that happens. So, you know, for me, it has been rebuilding that one little grain of sand at a time and trying to build on hope, which eventually became faith, which eventually became solid in an infrastructure to rebuild what my life was going to be. Now, it's taken nearly 20 years for that to happen, and it was the pending pandemic and the lockdown that really catapulted me into, sadly, skyrocketed my anxiety again. But at that point in time, it was like, all right, so you've done all of these things to build yourself up. How can you be in service to others at this point in time when people are going to be isolated and disconnected? Because one of my greatest beliefs is that human beings are wired for connection. We are wired that way. So if we're going to be disconnected and there are going to be people that are going to be isolated and alone, that's a lonely place to be. And if they don't have any kind of support systems in place, or they don't have any experience with mental health prior to now, they're going to be in trouble. So how can I help? And that's when the comedy stand started. And again, I'll repeat, I've been out there 10 and a half months. And so all the way through the winter, thankfully winters here on the West Coast aren't that bad. But I remember one day the rain coming in sideways and the wind was up and I was soaking wet and my hair was sideways. And I was like, wow, why am I doing this? Right, in service to others. Because here's the truth is, even though I was wet and cold, I could come in after that 2 hours of being out there. I had a hot shower. I have a house over, a roof over my head and stuff. So it was moving into that place of gratitude of being able to be in service to others and having the outlet of a safety of my home, safety of, having food, and again, eating as a family around our dinner table and stuff. So those are all things that have really helped me establish a strong foundation for mental health wellness in my life. And it's fragile. Mental health is fragile. So I could be doing really well for a long time, and then all of a sudden something hits me and I take a hard left. And I'm like, wow, how can I be back in that place, this dark, kind of dingy, gross place, when I feel like I've done so much work, because it can be that instant and it can take me out of the game sometimes. So, I have this crazy self-esteem thing where I hate and loathe myself so much. Like, I'm really mean to myself. Yet I still think I'm better than all of you. So that's a joke, by the way. And so I try and remain optimistic, and I think to myself, well, what could go wrong? And my anxiety is like, well, I'm glad you asked. Here are all the reasons why, right? So this is real life stuff, and I make light of it because it helps me to get through it. And it's no laughing matter, but laughter has certainly been the tool that I've used as the medicine to heal myself. I'm glad to have the comedy stand. I don't think I'm anything special. I'm a regular human being who had 3 kids, who suffered trauma at this point in time, just wants to give back to others and help others out of their dark holes, because I didn't have the help that I needed when I was there. And, people say, I'm here for you, just reach out, I'm here for you. And the problem is that at that point in time, the phone is very heavy. And I don't have the help that I needed when I was there. and the numbers are all skewed, and I didn't know how to ask for help because I didn't actually know what help looked like. So thankfully I've had the wherewithal to figure some of that stuff out, and I've had and built really great self sustaining support in place. But other than that, you know, it's a struggle. And I think that it's really important, vital, as a matter of fact, to have these conversations. So I feel extremely blessed to be here. You know, the other day I was walking down the street and I'm like, wow, I'm happy. And my dad was like, well, I hope you enjoyed those 2 minutes. It's over for you. It's over. So, you know, it's a balance of trying to figure out where to stand in all of that, and to allow some of the feelings to come up and feel them and acknowledge them, and understand that everybody walking down the street right now, in whatever country you're in, is having their challenges behind the scenes that we know nothing about.
Exactly.
Very true.
Nothing.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
So
And I'm just
honor
gonna
that
say right
stuff
here,
and love them, right? Like I do the Care Bear stare out my comedy stand all the time. And there are some people that scowl at me, and I'm like, wow, I'm giving away joy and you're scowling, and I don't understand why that exchange doesn't work. It's none of my business why it doesn't work, because I need to continue to give away what I have to give away without expectation of return.
Yeah.
And there are some that get it, right?
You know, like usually that's how someone will go and be like, preach, girl.
Yes.
That was
Preach that.
yeah. But I'm gonna say right here, I'm gonna add in, I'm gonna say, Tanya, you are very special.
Yeah, that I mean, we thank God. I personally thank God that you're able to, and I know there were great supports behind you, you know, that you were able to come from that moment to who you are today, and moving from needing help from people to being the help to other people. That's amazing. And I think that I thank you for coming and sharing that
Seriously.
with
And you're
us.
doing it. You're reaching so many people out there with your platform, and you're using that to help others. So kudos to you. That's absolutely amazing.